In 2026, Texas is one of the last places in America where you can still buy land for 4 figures instead of 6. Listings brag about 5 acres under $6,000 and 20 acres for less than a used car. No permits, no inspectors, no HOA board arguing about the shade of your tiny house. It sounds like a glitch in the system, but the part you don't see in the listing is what actually costs money. $30,000 water wells that have to punch through solid rock, mineral rights that belong to someone else, giving oil and gas companies more control over your property than you have. Ancient deed covenants buried in dusty courthouse files that quietly forbid mobile homes, small cabins, or full-time RV living, and sellers who take deposits for land they never owned in the first place. Right now, roughly 10 Texas counties still offer real parcels under $10,000 that can, in theory, support off-grid life. Every one of them trades freedom for a different problem: water, access, legal risk, or outright isolation. So in this video, we're going to unpack what those listings are really offering, county by county, and why 5 acres for $5,000 is usually the cheapest part of the story. Why this land suddenly matters. Since the pandemic, the traditional housing ladder has snapped for a huge slice of Americans over 35. Home prices ran ahead of wages, mortgage rates doubled, and rents turned into a second tax on anyone who didn't buy early. Retirees on fixed income, renters sick of moving every 2 years, and remote workers who can technically live anywhere are all looking at the same escape hatch. Forget the suburbs, just buy dirt, own something outright, build slowly, avoid the bank. Texas, with its huge rural counties and light regulation, looks like the perfect answer from a distance. Search for unrestricted land Texas and you'll see the pattern. Tiny down payments, interest-free owner financing, and aerial photos of endless open space. But that macro story hides 3 realities that drive everything you're about to see. The farther you get from cities, the cheaper the land and the more expensive the infrastructure. The looser the rules, the more the legal risk shifts onto you. The lower the price, the higher the odds there's a catch buried in the documents. Keep those 3 in mind as we walk through the counties. The landscape changes, the trade-offs don't. County 1, Hudspeth/Sierra Blanca, maximum freedom, minimum water. We'll start in far west Texas in Hudspeth County around the town of Sierra Blanca. If you've seen 5 acres for under $6,000 anywhere online, there's a good chance it was here. In the unincorporated parts of this county, formal zoning might as well not exist. You can drag in a shipping container, stack tires into an earthship, or park an old RV and turn it into a permanent home, and there's usually no inspector on your doorstep. Owner-financed deals are common, a few $100s down, a couple $100 a month, and no credit check. On paper, it looks like the purest form of freedom. Then you run into the water problem. Usable groundwater often sits hundreds of feet down. Drilling that far through desert rock routinely costs 3 times what you paid for the parcel. Even if you hit water, the flow might be barely enough to keep up with basic household use, let alone gardening or livestock. Rain catchment? It's technically possible, but in a low rainfall desert, capturing enough water means large roof areas, big tanks, and a lifestyle built around scarcity. On top of that, large chunks of Hudspeth's land surface sit on top of mineral estates controlled by the state or private companies. You might own the surface, but if someone decides to drill, the mineral owner outranks you. Your remote sanctuary can turn into a work site with trucks and rigs you never agreed to. Hudspeth is the purest taste of Texas off-grid freedom. It's also one of the best examples of why cheap land doesn't equal cheap living. County 2, Terlingua/Brewster, shared roads, roulette wells. Head south to Brewster County and you hit Terlingua Ranch, a sprawling maze of desert tracks near Big Bend. Here, 5-acre parcels under $10,000 show up often, especially further from the highway. The rules change slightly. Instead of total neglect, you get a property owners association. They grade roads, maintain common areas, and charge an annual fee that's low enough to feel harmless, but high enough that you now have recurring obligations. The county mostly cares that your septic system and, well, if you drill one, meet health standards. They're less concerned with whether your house is stick-built, an A-frame, or a yurt. But water becomes a spin of the wheel. On one lot, someone hits water at 120 feet and gets a usable well for a manageable cost. On the next ridge over, the driller has to chase an aquifer 1,000 feet down. The invoice looks like a luxury car payment plan. From a distance, Terlingua looks like Hudspeth but prettier. Big views, a bit more community, and at least some maintained roads. Up close, it's the same equation. Low buy-in, high uncertainty, and a single piece of infrastructure, the well, that can make or break the entire project. County 3, Presidio, silence, cliffs, and zoning fine print. Shift west into Presidio County and the isolation goes to another level. This is the kind of empty where the nearest porch light might be miles away. 10 to 40 acre tracts under $10,000 do exist here, carved out of old ranches. On a listing page, it looks like a bargain. More land, fewer neighbors, similar price. The part that doesn't show up in the photos is the terrain. Ridges, gullies, and rock shelves can make simple things, like driving a truck to the spot where you want your house, stupidly expensive. Cutting in even a basic access road over rough high desert can quickly exceed the cost of the land itself. Then there's the subtle legal trap. Zoning changes that relabel certain areas as conservation or recreation rather than residential. If your parcel is small enough and falls under one of those categories, you may literally be barred from building a permanent dwelling. You own the land, you just can't live on it legally. Water is as unforgiving here as in Hudspeth. Most realistic strategies involve solar for power, hauled water, and large storage tanks. Presidio is where people go when they want to vanish and they know what they're getting into. For everyone else, it's a place where the dream dies somewhere between the cost of roads and the line in the zoning code that says no residential structures. County 4, Terrell/Sanderson, no grid, no neighbors, no backup. Terrell County, anchored by the tiny town of Sanderson, is one of the emptiest places in Texas. If you want to be truly alone, this is where the map starts to blur. On the market, you'll see huge ranch tracts priced reasonably per acre, and occasionally sub-10-acre pieces that slip under the $10,000 line. They're usually in rugged canyon country or up on blown-open plateaus. There is no "the power line is a few miles away" conversation here. In many sections, there are no power lines at all. The only realistic options are solar and wind, plus battery storage and a generator for when things go wrong. Waste is another hard line. Even out here, you don't escape state septic regulations. Rocky limestone soils make installation tricky. You might be forced into engineered systems that cost far more than the brochure version of "just dig a hole and drop a tank." Mineral rights, again, are often separated from the surface. You may never see a rig, but if you do, the law doesn't give you much leverage. Terrell County appeals to hunters, hardcore preppers, and people who are already comfortable fixing mechanical problems by themselves in the middle of nowhere. For someone imagining cheap, peaceful retirement, it's usually a mismatch. County 5, Culberson and Jeff Davis/Van Horn, Texas mountains with a hidden bill. Near the town of Van Horn, in Culberson and Jeff Davis counties, the landscape shifts from flat desert to dramatic peaks and ridges. Marketing photos lean into this hard: mountain views, cooler summers, Texas alpine desert. 5 to 20 acre parcels with that kind of scenery sometimes dip near the $10,000 range, especially smaller or more remote lots. Regulation is still minimal in a lot of unincorporated areas. No HOA, no strict zoning, and plenty of sun make it a natural target for off-grid builds. Guadalupe Mountains National Park nearby adds a sense of permanence and beauty. But high elevation creates a new version of the same old problem: water. Drilling at altitude often means going deep through rock layers, with costs per foot at the upper end of the scale. It's not unusual for a single well to cost twice the land itself, and that's assuming you hit something usable. Add in the speculative effect of a nearby space facility and increased interest from outside buyers, and prices near the main corridors rise faster than in the truly empty counties. Van Horn area land is best treated as a gorgeous but demanding canvas. It's ideal if you understand that the cheap part ends the moment you start punching holes in the ground. County 6, Panhandle Town/Electra and Friends, cheap lots, full rules. Jump to the Texas Panhandle and the definition of cheap land changes. In towns like Electra or on the fringe of Amarillo, you'll often see small lots around a sixth to a quarter of an acre, priced at or below $10,000. On a listing site, these show up in the same search results as off-grid desert tracts. But they're not the same thing. These are inside or just outside municipal boundaries. That means city building codes, mandatory connections to water and sewer where available, and sometimes strict rules about what counts as a legal dwelling. You can't buy a city lot, park an RV, refuse all utilities, and call it off-grid if the local ordinance says otherwise. If you try, the enforcement doesn't come from a grumpy neighbor. It comes from the city itself. The reason these lots are cheap isn't freedom, it's demand. Many of these towns peaked decades ago. People left for bigger cities, industry moved on. Land got cheap because nobody wanted it, not because it was secretly the perfect homestead. If your goal is a tiny house with city water, a sewer tap, and no HOA, these towns can work. If your goal is independence from infrastructure, they mostly don't. County 7. East Texas Lakes / Brookland, Jasper, Polk. Water everywhere, rules in the shadows. Drive east toward the piney woods, around Brookland and Jasper County or lake communities in Polk County, and the environment flips. You go from dust to trees, from dry creek beds to year-round lakes and ponds. Small half-acre or two-thirds acre lots near water regularly show up at or below $10,000. They're marketed with photos of tall pines, calm coves, and weekend fishing. The big advantage here is obvious: water. Wells are often shallow. Surface water is nearby. Rainfall is consistent enough that a garden doesn't feel like an act of defiance against nature. But East Texas has a long memory, and so do its records. Many of these areas were carved into subdivisions decades ago with detailed covenants. No single wides or older mobile homes. Minimum square footage requirements. Prohibitions on temporary dwellings like RVs as primary homes. The HOA that originally enforced those rules might be gone. The covenants aren't. They sit in the chain of title, waiting. A neighbor who doesn't like what you're building can still drag those documents into court. Humidity adds another invisible cost. Building methods that survive indefinitely in the desert will rot, mold, or rust out here if you don't design for moisture. That means better materials, ventilation, and details your average cheap land ad never mentions. East Texas gives you something West Texas can't: an easier time with food and water. It also replaces water scarcity with legal and maintenance complexity. So yes, in 2026, buying land in Texas for under $10,000 is still real. The mistake is assuming that number has anything to do with your total cost to live there. The winners in this game are boring. They read every line of every document. They pay for surveys, title work, and realistic infrastructure estimates. They pick a county whose problems they can live with. Maybe water scarcity, maybe legal complexity, maybe isolation. The people who lose are the ones who stop at the headline price and assume land is the same thing as a livable home.